This video is about the process of victim blaming and victim shaming. This is an issue with human nature that will likely never be resolved. When it comes to the abuse against the disabled and the homeless, this is not a new problem. This was not a new problem when my great-grandparents were born. This is an ongoing issue. Our laws are medieval in nature. I mean, we've got the equivalent of the Stone Age when it comes to our rights. Now, that's not to say that our rights on paper don't exist. They absolutely do. It's a matter of them being observed. And they don't get observed when people want to use the term mentally ill as an excuse why it's okay. It's not okay. When anybody can assault me at any point in time and say, well, he's mentally ill, and magically get away with it, despite what it says on paper, despite what the law states that it is against the law for them to victimize me. The problem that we have is enforcement. Who is going to enforce these laws? Law enforcement obviously preys on individuals who are easy to prey upon. Most of America does that, despite the fact that it is illegal. Whether somebody is homeless or not, if they are disabled, it is still against the law. And those rights of a disabled person, whether they are homeless or not, do need to be observed. Then there's the rights of the Constitution. Whether somebody is homeless or not, those rights do need to be observed. When somebody is called mentally ill, that automatically discredits them. That discredits them to the public. That discredits them to the courts, despite the fact that the laws are stated to the contrary. They are still disabled. Now, when somebody has a crime committed against them, now I often use rape as my example because rape is a heinous crime. So is victimizing an at-risk adult. It is a heinous crime. So is child molestation and child abuse. These are considered heinous crimes. But people want to, well, for example, victim shaming. If a woman is wearing a skirt, that does not make it okay to rape her. It is still wrong. It is still illegal. Now, for someone saying, well, she's got a bunch of makeup on, and she's got a low-cut shirt, and she's wearing a miniskirt, obviously she is dressing to be looked at. Well, you can argue that all you want, but whether or not she wants to be looked at does not make it okay to rape her. Now, many rapists, when they choose a victim, they will choose somebody that is quote-unquote mentally ill. Many victims end up with PTSD, and then it is nearly impossible, because of the severe anxiety and the communication issues that are inherent in such anxiety, it is nearly impossible for them to turn in their predator without someone there for their safety. Many officers, when you try to turn in your rapist, will grill a woman as if she maybe wanted it. No. This is not acceptable. This is assuredly not acceptable by an officer of the law. Are you sure you didn't want it maybe a little? How is that okay? How is that even an acceptable line of questioning? Or an acceptable line of thinking for somebody who is in the line of public safety and public service? Now, there's the idea of Many of these predators, the reason that they are getting away with it, the reason that there is only a 1 to 3% conviction rate against rapists is because of the trauma. Because of the trauma of the victim. Or because of the term mentally ill. Oh, well, she's bipolar. She wanted it at the time and then decided she didn't want it afterwards. And in cases where there's alcohol involved, yes, oftentimes that is the case. I've known many women who have thrown themselves at a guy when they were drunk, and if the guy does something with them because the woman is throwing themselves at a man who is obviously drunk as well, they're both consenting while drunk to doing this. It's wrong for both of them, legally, but both are engaging in it, and since neither party is trying to press charges on it, it is considered mutual. It is still considered mutual consent if the victim never comes forward, and that's horrible. Now, if it's a situation where a woman is drunk and she's throwing herself at a man, and say he's got a girlfriend or he's got a wife, and he says, no, I'm married, and she continues, and I've seen this many times with women, and he says no, many of these women in a drunken rage will throw a huge tantrum in the middle of a party, in the middle of a house full of people, or even out in the open. This makes things further complicated for people who are actually being victimized. Because we've got somebody who's making a big scene because she can't get the guy that she wants at that particular point in time. And I'm not saying that that is an okay thing to do. I'm rather saying that it's not. I'm saying that it is wrong whether you are a male or a female. If a man is wearing a tank top that shows off his muscles, does that make it okay to expect sexual favors from him? No, it doesn't. When it comes to heinous crimes, many predators choose victims that they're easy to get away with doing it to. Oftentimes, that means somebody who doesn't have the money for a lawyer, somebody who doesn't have a support network, somebody who doesn't have family present, somebody who is called mentally ill. Meanwhile, trauma responses are treated as aggressive behavior. It's not aggressive behavior, it is fear-based trauma responses. And when you have officers that are going to say to you things like, well, are you sure you didn't want it a little bit? Are you sure you didn't propagate it? Things of that nature. Yes, that's absolutely going to induce trauma responses from the victim. Now they are afraid because they are being grilled as if they are the one who did something wrong. Well, the problem isn't that the laws make it okay. It's that how do we enforce it? How do we stop officers from treating the victim like they're the predator? How do we stop the officers from grilling that person? You have to have someone there and present. That is what makes people so easy to victimize, especially the homeless. The homeless are afraid to stick up for each other to the police because the police will often victimize all of us, or arrest all of us. They will arrest the victims on trumped up charges, or they will arrest the witnesses on trumped up charges. Now, there are many cases in Boulder where somebody who is not homeless, I'm getting lightheaded, I'm going to have to pause it. There are many cases where a witness who is not homeless in Boulder County that I've seen with my own two eyes and have observed these situations, where the officers actually will take action against an individual who has victimized a homeless person, if someone in a house calls it in. Now, when a homeless person goes missing, the police in most places, in most cases, will not take a missing persons report. For many of the travelers, everybody wants to say, oh, don't pick up hitchhikers, they're crazy, they'll chop you up into little pieces and throw you in a ditch and steal your car. That situation is extremely rare. Now, statistically, a hitchhiker is 38 times more likely to be killed than the person who picks them up. It is more likely that somebody who is a serial killer is going to pick a target of opportunity. If you see a lone traveler on the side of the road, that person is alone. Who knows that they're there? Who is aware of where they were picked up? And that's what makes it so easy to victimize somebody who is a traveler or someone who is homeless. And people say, oh, well, you just need to forget about it, you just need to let it go. The problem is that I've seen this happen to many people before Natalie Bollinger was killed. I've been speaking out about these actions against the disabled and against the homeless since well before I ever knew Natalie Bollinger existed. I have been fighting for these rights ever since before Natalie Bollinger existed. The difference between what I did then and what I did now is that now I scream very loud. Now let's change the scenario around a little bit. Mind you, I gotta pause again. Saying that a victim is propagating the abuse because they spoke out is victim blaming. If a woman is trying to turn in her rapist and the police do nothing and she speaks out about it, does that mean that she's asking to be raped again? No, it absolutely does not. If a homeless person is assaulted by the police and he speaks out about it, does that make it okay for police to assault him again? No, it does not. To say that somebody speaking up about their abuse is propagating the abuse is entirely wrong. When I left Virginia, I tried to let Maddie Boa know what was going on, what had happened in Virginia. And the first thing that she did was treat me like I was some sort of a monster. So I blocked her, I blocked Natalie, and I blocked Alicia. I was done with that. I didn't need any sort of drama from that trauma at all. I just wanted to get on with my life. Matter of fact, on the way back to Virginia, or on the way back to Boulder from Virginia, there were several people that I contacted, and I was glad that I was going to be able to go see them. I was glad that I was going to be able to go visit them. Now, I was having a trauma response coming home from Virginia to Boulder, Colorado, and Boulder was my home. I was having a trauma response most of the way back to Boulder. When I got back to Boulder, though, I was so happy to be there. I was so happy that I was going to be able to see my friends and loved ones that I hadn't been able to see in almost a year. Well, half a year. After I hurt my back, I just simply couldn't travel like I used to. I couldn't go and see my friends, even in other locations in Boulder, because of my injuries. And obviously, my injuries were not caused by Boulder Police Department. They weren't. But my injuries made me easier to prey on. And Boulder Police Department took advantage of that. And as a result, I was not getting any sleep. That's what Natalie Bollinger rescued me from. When all of my friends were telling me, oh, you just need to let it go, you need to let it go. No, this is happening to me nightly at this point. Every night I'm having to deal with Boulder Police Department harassing me and preventing me from sleeping, and I'm having mental breakdowns over this. And I'm trying to call my friends for help, people like Veronica Randall, and say, hey, I'm being victimized, I need help stopping this. And she wanted to do my taxes, to be nice. She wanted to do something nice for me. And instead of me getting the help that I needed to stop the Boulder Police from their incessant crap, instead I'm arguing with Veronica Randall over her wanting to do my taxes. She's wanting to do something nice for me, But she's having unrealistic expectations. She's thinking, obviously, that I can just snap my fingers, and when I snap my fingers, I'll have those W-2s in my hand. That's just not how it works. The manager at the Cheesecake Factory at the time, his name was Jesse. I had gone in on multiple occasions to speak with Jesse, and he hadn't been there. I had to be there on a day that he was there. And then they had to get the W-2s actually sent to the Cheesecake Factory so that I could go to the Cheesecake Factory and pick it up. Well, that was not fast enough for Veronica Randall. Alright, maybe that wasn't smart. So I'm dealing with somebody treating me like crap over them not getting it fast enough. It's not happening fast enough for Veronica Randall. And in her mind, it's because I'm not trying. Meanwhile, I'm hounding these people at Cheesecake Factory every day, and they're getting aggravated with me. They're aggravated that I'm still going to them every day because Veronica Randall is hounding me. Yes, Veronica, I'm doing what you're asking. But that's not how she saw it. And then she's wanting to know why it is that I'm not using the bike that they gave me. Well, the bike didn't have a seat on it, and that wasn't the reason that I wasn't using it. The seat had been stolen. That's pretty common in Boulder, people stealing parts off of your bike. The problem was, because of my back, I couldn't get onto the bicycle itself to actually use it. I still cannot use a bicycle. I cannot physically get on a bicycle. So she was angry with me over two things that she had assumptions of, and she was doing it in texting. Oh my God, this is the situation, the very scenario in specific that makes me have a panic attack over even trying to type to people. It's very inhumane. You can't hear what it is that someone's saying, and you got to hear from the conversation with Tara Smith from Adult Protective Services, and also from the messages between me and Natalie, and me and Alicia, and me and Maddie. I mean, nearly everybody, also Marcia Estrada, nearly all of these people have acknowledged that that is not an effective form of communication, that listening is more effective than texting. It's also faster. When I'm having to wait for 4 to 6 hours for somebody to text me back, you know, it would be easier if instead of mean texting me really fast, like Veronica Randall did, she was able to text and send me between 5 and 8 text messages before I could even reply to one. And she's asking multiple questions. And then when I answer it, she basically gets to pick and choose which of those 5 questions that she asked that she wants to apply that answer to. And that gets very complicated. This is where autism comes into play. You can't rapid fire questions like that. If you ask me a question, it may take me up to a minute to be able to formulate the answer. Especially if it's, for many of us who are autistic, we have to rehearse something before we say it. If we go to Burger King, we have to rehearse what we're going to order before we get there. Now, if we get there and let's say I don't have any money and I don't want anything from Burger King anyway, right? But then someone is saying, hey, what do you want? I'm broke. Well, I didn't ask you if you had any money. I asked you, what do you want? I don't want anything. Sean, I want to buy you dinner. Tell me what you want. Just pick something then. But no, Sean, what do you want? So here, at that point, I'm already uncomfortable with the situation. I'm uncomfortable with somebody giving me something because later on they'll probably throw it in my face. And that's something that Mandy Singer is, of course, afraid of, that if I give her anything and she accepts it, that it's something that later on I will throw in her face. And that's a valid concern. So, if we go through these situations where I did the right thing, where I did walk away, and it followed me. That's the thing that people are not getting through their heads, is that rumors like that follow you everywhere. Now, when I got into housing in Chapel, if I'd have had a caseworker who was willing to help me as they were supposed to, I could have gotten that paperwork from Cindy. I also could have turned in complaints against Cindy. Now, as it was, I had to speak with Nancy, who was Cindy's supervisor, and I did voice my complaints to her. I'm getting lightheaded again. When I got into low income in Chapel, I had almost everything I needed. I had a roof over my head, I had internet access, I had access to a mailbox, and I had that for quite a few months. What I didn't have is a caseworker. That was essential. That is essential for the observation of my rights. That is essential to make sure that my rights are not violated. That when I do try to get my paperwork, that I am not denied that paperwork. That if there's an issue with my refrigerator, I can have it addressed immediately instead of them bringing a refrigerator 3 months later. Especially when I'm having to live on a fixed income and losing over $100 worth of food that was in the refrigerator because the fridge didn't work, and nobody bothered to tell me that the fridge didn't work. That's my food for the month. That's a whole bunch of perishable items that are now stinking up my house. A lot of people thought, well, you know, he's in housing, so everything should be fine now. Everything should be fine. Everything is blown over. They've caught Natalie's killer. Everything should be fine. But it wasn't fine. I still had to deal with people throwing things at me, and people throwing beer bottles at me, people screaming profanities at me, and people threatening to kill me or threatening to assault me if I came anywhere near them and their children. I'm not wanting to go anywhere near any of you or your children. I want to be left alone. I don't walk down the street for people to propagate. You know, that's not what I'm attempting to do. When I'm walking from my house or my apartment in low income down to the grocery store, I'm going to the grocery store to get groceries. I'm not going on that walk to propagate crimes against me. When people choose to come out into the street, such as the situation with Robert Warnick, the first time that I ever knew there was any sort of a problem with him, it's because he came out into the street outside of Jeff Baldridge's house to threaten to kill me. Now, did I propagate that by speaking up? No. With the history of Scott DaCosta and his deputies not taking reports and not writing reports after 911 calls, they'll do this for other people. By law, they're supposed to. By Nebraska law, they're supposed to write a report when 911 is called. When 911 was called because I was attempting to commit suicide out at Chapel Lake, when the deputy, Cody Sailhorse, pulled up behind me, I was attempting to commit suicide. That's because I'd already gone to them about abuse in Chapel, Nebraska. I'd already gone to Jordan Anderson after Natalie's death, and I'd gone to multiple deputies before Natalie's death. None of them ever wrote a report. Jordan Anderson didn't write a report. The three times that I flagged officers down before Natalie was killed, never wrote a report. Scott DaCosta says that there was no report from the situation where I was taken to the hospital on suicide watch in January of 2017. They took me to the hospital cleared me. Obviously I was not attempting to commit suicide. I did need help stopping it. And that's when I got Tamara and Nicole Peralta. And that went extremely well. To say that somebody is propagating the crimes against them, you're basically telling the victim that they're asking for it because they told on their abuser. When time and again we have seen that abusers who are not stopped will do it again and again and again. And the more they get away with it, the more they believe that they should get away with it. The more it reinforces their belief that it is okay. And if they pick somebody that they can call mentally ill, the rest of America says that it's okay. The rest of the country says, oh, well, we shouldn't believe that person, they're mentally ill. They want to have that argument that mentally ill people are not people. That is what you were saying loud and clear at that point. No, if someone is mentally ill, they're automatically an at-risk adult just because of that. That fact right there makes them an at-risk adult. And an at-risk adult is supposed to have someone there and present for their own safety because of this issue. It's too easy for people to get away with victimizing someone by calling them mentally ill. And then there's the baseless assumptions that everyone who's mentally ill must be schizophrenic. Well, that's just simply not the case. If someone has PTSD, that doesn't mean they're schizophrenic. Somebody having ADHD does not mean that they're schizophrenic. Someone having Tourette syndrome does not mean that they're schizophrenic. Meanwhile, Tourette syndrome is a neurological disorder. It's not a choice that I have. It's not like I woke up one morning and went, you know, I think I'm going to have Tourette syndrome today. No. And when people assault me for winking at them weird because I'm nervous, or people want to assume that I'm on drugs because I'm nervous, and they want to do something to victimize me or to remove me or to basically they're creeped out because I'm different. They don't want to understand my differences. They just want those differences to go away. They don't want somebody who does that around them. Meanwhile, I'm not winking at you because I want to assault you. I'm not winking at you because I want to touch you inappropriately. I'm doing it because I'm nervous and because I have a neurological disorder. It is a disability. And it is obviously a disability that throughout my entire life, people have not just made fun of me, but assaulted me for on many occasions. So at all points in time, I have to try to control my Tourette syndrome so that I'm not assaulted for having Tourette syndrome. People want to tell me, well, you know, there's pills for that. They don't want to look at the side effects of those pills or ask if I have any adverse reactions to them, and I absolutely do. There's also the fact that those medications are damaging. Many of the medications that are given to treat Tourette syndrome are liver damaging medications. When I was a child, there was a point in time where I was getting my liver function test taken every 2 weeks. Can you imagine getting your liver function test every 2 weeks to make sure that your liver is still working because you have medications that you're taking because you do this? Does that really hurt you? Does it? I mean, my entire life I've been called a creep and a freak and a weirdo because I do this. So now you want to put me on drugs because other people victimize me for doing that? And then when the drugs make it worse, what do you do then? You change the drugs. You change the medications that you're taking. And after going through a whole regimen of medications that don't work, eventually you find one that does work slightly sometimes. When I first started taking lithium, for example, Lithium worked for about 2 to 3 months, but that was it. Now, lithium is not commonly prescribed for Tourette syndrome. Matter of fact, Tourette syndrome isn't even on the list of things that they prescribe lithium for. However, for a few months, lithium completely stopped my Tourette syndrome. But then, when it was no longer working for Tourette syndrome, what are they going to do? They're going to try to increase the dosage. And if increasing the dosage doesn't work, they'll increase it again. At that point, you're at dangerous levels of taking lithium, and there's also the fact that lithium is one of those medications that taking you off of it is dangerous. So basically, I'm being drugged so that you guys don't victimize me for being different. And that is very much the situation here. When I was walking down the street in, what was it, end of 2019, maybe 2020, I can't remember now. All I was doing was walking down the street. Now, ever since I was in high school, I've walked all around Chapel, Nebraska, and people were pretty well used to it. There was a couple of times in high school where I had the police stop me like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night to go, hey, why are you walking around this time of night? The reality of the situation is 10 o'clock at night, everything in Chapel is dead. The only thing open is pump and pantry. And after that, I can basically sit there and enjoy the peace and quiet, enjoy the breeze, and not have to deal with people screaming and shouting stuff out at me out of their windows as they're driving by. And, people did throw stuff at me in high school. When I was in Lodgepole High School, for example, there's something I don't know how to do. I practiced it a lot. But they take a quarter or a penny or something and they flick it at you. And it doesn't feel good. And according to Nebraska state law, that is assault. But then there's the fact that Mr. Addison, when Dusty Payton was flicking stuff at me, he was flicking pennies at me. And Miss Susie was the teacher, and she wouldn't do anything about it. And I went to Mr. Addison about it. Well, Mr. Addison wouldn't do anything about it. I got kicked out of Lodgepole High School because I screamed at the top of my lungs in Lodgepole High School, and I get told, well, you shouldn't have done that. What was I supposed to do? I'd gone to the teacher about it. I'd gone to the principal about it. They shouldn't have been flicking stuff at me. Now, it's not like these things happened every day, but the fact is, every time that it happened, I have to take the blame. I have to take the punishment. The only thing that I can do, because I'm the one who's called mentally ill, I'm the one who didn't grow up in that town since kindergarten, all I can do is take the abuse. It's a similar situation when I was in Chapel housing the second time. Without Jen Beebe doing what it is that the courts said that she had to, I didn't have any way to turn this stuff in. When I went to the sheriff, he did not try to investigate it. People want to continue this argument that I'm asking for it. Basically telling me that my shirt is too low cut and my cleavage is showing, or my skirt is above my knees, so I must be asking for it. And because I speak out about the abuse against me, I must be asking for more of it. I'm propagating it. No, I'm not propagating it. I'm speaking out about the fact that these things continue to happen. That mentally ill tag, people will be able to use it for the rest of my life to prevent me from showing evidence, to prevent me from having something done about the crimes against me. Now, obviously, there's also the situations where I'm told that what they're doing is not against the law. Well, if it's not against the law for them to do it, then it's not against the law for me to do it. That's how the law is written, isn't it? If it's wrong for one of us, it's wrong for all of us. People say, well, it's the way that you reacted is the reason that this happened to you. Well, how did I react the first time? The first time I reacted by going to people who I knew and asking for help. I reacted by getting a hold of my abusers, the people who had started the rumors I was being abused over. I had to unblock them from Facebook and say, hey, this is what's going on, please put a stop to it. I wasn't threatening them, I wasn't harassing them, I wasn't saying that I was going to chop them into little pieces and feed them to their dog. I was saying, hey, I'm being victimized for things that didn't happen. Would you please clear the air? Well, at that point I got blocked, which, hey, it happens. At that point I have to find an alternative route to try to get the abuse to stop. Going to my friends obviously didn't work because they wanted to talk over me and tell me I just needed to love myself. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. You just need to move on, and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, move on to where? Move on how? Be specific. How do you move on from that? You mean pretend it's not happening? Pretend that Robert Warnick did not come out into the street and threaten to shoot me? Pretend that Robert Warnick didn't come to Pumpkin Pantry and threaten to assault me and try to intimidate me into being his friend on Facebook? Pretend that I didn't have to fear walking by his house on the easiest route to the post office. And it wasn't just Robert Warnick. And people say, well, why don't you just move elsewhere? And I did move elsewhere. I can't take care of myself because of my physical disabilities, and because of my mental disabilities, I am barely a functional human being. It is my fears of things that have continually happened that contribute a lot to this. I'm getting lightheaded again. Now, the situation with Leslie Snell, pretending like I was threatening her and her family, that is not the case. You are not going to find a single thing in any of this where I am threatening harm against her children. You're not going to find anything in any of this where I am threatening harm against her or her husband. Now, I've got many people who I've recorded, and even recently, that they tell me things like, oh, well, you know, I wish I could be there. If I was there, I'd beat the hell out of anybody who did this or that and the other. I don't want to hear that. I'm against that. I'm trying to get this taken care of in court, trying to show that the laws that are supposed to protect disabled individuals were not and are not being observed, and who's going to make them observe them? Who is going to make these people do their jobs? If a disabled person is being not just assaulted, but repeatedly assaulted over something that they didn't do, and they can't turn in these crimes, these predators are getting away with it, and they are likely getting a very big head about it. And the bigger their head gets, the more they get away with it, the more they think they can do it to others. Case in point, Waylon Lolatai. He assaulted me in January of 2018, and people were not all up in arms about him then. They were cheering him on, saying, yeah, go Lolatai. Now, obviously, at the very beginning, I didn't even know his name. I'd asked for it, and although it is against the law for them not to give you the officer's name, I was denied his name. I had to learn his name months and months and months later from a website called Colorado Donkey Watch. Now with me breaking the windows, people want to say, well, you know, it's your fault that you're not in housing because you broke those windows. You know, you would have been fine in that housing if you hadn't broken those windows. No, I was not fine in that housing. And that's what people don't want to look at. They don't want to look at the fact that I had to wait 3 months to get a refrigerator. They don't want to look at the fact that I was denied my paperwork. They don't want to look at the fact that I still had to deal with people like Robert Warnick and Christopher Kurth. Now obviously I focus on those two in specific for a reason. I know their names. I don't know the names of every person who has threatened to assault me or kill me in Chapel, Nebraska. I don't know the names of the people who have thrown beer bottles at me. Now how many times has Chris Kurth thrown a beer bottle at me? Never. How many times has Robert Warnick thrown a beer bottle at me? He's never done so. These were not the people who were throwing the beer bottles at me. Now, having a beer bottle bounce off of your head, it throws you for a loop for a couple of days. But when you're called mentally ill, people don't even require evidence. Somebody's word is good enough. Oh, well, Crazy Sean did this, or Crazy Sean did that. Well, your assumption that I'm crazy doesn't make me crazy. Being abused and not being allowed to turn it in like everybody else, that'll drive you crazy. Now, with me speaking out, I'll give you an example. Sarah Bacon. Now, the other day I did record a phone call with her, and she was saying that if she was here, she would hurt anyone who tried to touch me and stuff like that. I don't want to hear that. That scares me. That's not the help that I need. I need someone to speak up about what's been happening to me. Because my voice isn't being heard by the courts. My voice is not being heard by the courts. My voice is not being heard by the police. My victims dropped the term mentally ill, and then magically everything is fine. And people say, well, you're propagating it by speaking out. No, it happens whether I speak out or not. That's what everybody wants to turn a blind eye from. Like, if they assume that this is happening because of whatever their ignorance tells them, whatever their ignorant assumptions from not being in the situation tells them, that does not make it okay. And that doesn't stop it from happening in the future. And it is easy to victimize me. It has happened long term before Natalie was killed, long term before I met Natalie, and it has happened many times since, where the term mentally ill is used to prevent me from getting assistance from the courts, assistance from the police. Just like that rape victim who says, hey, I was raped. Are you sure you didn't ask for it? If you've got somebody who goes in with you after you've been raped, especially if you have been called mentally ill, you have to have a friend or a family member go in with you when you turn in that crime. Because one of your trauma responses, especially when they start trying to grill you, is to talk faster. And the faster you talk and the more scared you are, the more jumbled the words come out. And then they write down the words that didn't come out quite right, and somehow magically that's used as an excuse. Well, you know, we got that woman to say something that wasn't entirely true because she was flustered. So obviously she must be a liar, or obviously she's not dependable and cannot be depended upon in court. Same thing that's been happening to me. I am flustered. I am speaking out about long-term abuse that doesn't just happen to me. Anybody who is called mentally ill is prone to this abuse. Anybody who is alone is prone to this abuse. If you are alone and called mentally ill and people know it, you are the easiest person to victimize, and everyone in the country knows it. Those people who want to say, oh, well, people wouldn't do that because it's against the law. You know what? Murder is against the law, and people are murdered every day. Rape is against the law, and people are raped every day. Officers murder people. Officers rape people. These are the guys who are supposed to know that this is wrong. These are the guys we're supposed to go to investigate these things, to turn these things in when they happen to us. And we get to see every day that there are many officers who are taking part in these illegal and immoral actions themselves. And in many of these cases, they have a long history of people trying to turn them in, and their fellow officers, well, basically harassing and scaring the victims so that they are too afraid to come forward. With somebody yelling at me and arguing with me over whether or not I am propagating the crimes against me, no, it's not propagating, it is speaking out. I would prefer to do it in court. If I had assistance, I could do it in court. But then there's all of these services that you guys believe are supposed to help us, these services that the police send us to, these services that Polly Olson sends us to. When I made those videos where I spoke very loud and proud about the fact that, yeah, these people are wanting to do harm, this is most of these people's suggestions of what they would do if they were in this situation, or what they think I should do in this situation, or what they think other people should do to me in this situation, their suggestions are all violent. And when I pose a question, now obviously we can't use Leslie Snell's name in this because she'll pretend that it's a threat against her life, so we'll use Mickey Mouse, alright? Let's say Mickey Mouse is one of my predators, and I'm wanting to turn Mickey Mouse into the court, and people are telling me, you know, you ought to just shoot him. You ought to just shoot Mickey Mouse. Or, you know, if I was there, I would beat the shit out of Mickey Mouse for getting anywhere near you. Or, you know, I wish there was somebody there that would beat the shit out of Mickey Mouse for you. Or things of that nature. Or saying, you know what? Somebody should just shoot Mickey Mouse in the head. If I was there, Sean, I would shoot Mickey Mouse in the head for you. And I say, what? That's your answer? That's your answer for everything? You want me to shoot Mickey Mouse in the head? Is that really what you want me to do? Is that your solution for this? No, in that situation, you are going to make them a martyr. At that point, it doesn't matter what they did wrong to you. You are the bad guy. You have chosen to take another human life. Obviously, rather than choosing to take other human lives, I have chosen to try to do it in court, and I have been cut off from doing so every time. I've been cut off from speaking in court. While many of these people, their solutions are violent, my solution is not violent. I don't see violence as a solution. If you remove violence as a solution, you find actual solutions, long-term solutions. And I do understand that if Mickey Mouse is victimizing me, and I were to kill Mickey Mouse, that Mickey Mouse would not be able to victimize me or anyone else. But what's that going to do to me? I get sent to prison for shooting Mickey Mouse. Now, when I cite my actual predators as the example, they get to pretend that I am threatening them in specific. Like I am threatening them when I am in fact speaking against those things. Now, Sarah Bacon, when she says that, she doesn't mean anything harmful. That's not how she's intending it. She's just trying to say, well, you know, if I was there, I would protect you. The same thing with Ed, when he was trying to say, oh, well, I'd kill them and so on and so forth. Well, I don't want to hear that he would kill them. I don't want to think about that kind of stuff. That messes with my head. With Mandy Singer, you know, she was doing the same thing, and not in the same way, obviously not to the same degree, but she's like, you know, Sean, if I was in your situation, I would have fought back a lot sooner. And when she was talking about fighting back, she was talking about fighting back physically. But at that point, once you're already being assaulted, you know, for her, she would physically defend herself. For me, I know that I'm not going to be allowed. I know that if I defend myself against Robert Warnick when he assaults me, that is going to be used to paint me as a violent person. Now there's also the protected status. Somebody who is a registered sex offender, it's illegal to commit these crimes against them, even more so than anyone else, because they have a protected status. It is considered a hate crime to do these things to a registered sex offender. I'm not a registered sex offender. Matter of fact, I'm not a sex offender at all. But I'm treated like I am a sex offender because of a rumor that I stalked somebody that I did not stalk. People go, oh, well, he just couldn't take no for an answer. Look at all of these other people who couldn't take no for an answer, so they killed their wife or they killed their girlfriend. Me and Natalie never dated. We weren't boyfriend and girlfriend. We didn't have a relationship like that. The gaslighting by the Bollinger family. You know, if people want to tell me to let it go and just ignore it, no, you know what? That doesn't work. Natalie Bollinger, when she disappeared, regardless of how people felt about me, regardless of the repeated assaults against me, the thing that was most important to me was Natalie being safe, Natalie calling her mother, Natalie getting to somewhere safe. And I wasn't rich, and I'm not rich now, but I offered every penny that I had when she disappeared. Hey, Natalie, you have my number. If you need money to get somewhere safe, let me know. I will send you every penny that I have to get you somewhere safe. And that or that Facebook video is still up. It's still on there. My friends were more interested in legal repercussions, and I was more interested in Natalie Bollinger being found safely. I was afraid that Ted Bollinger had killed her for obvious reasons. The gaslighting that continued, I didn't have a safe environment. Every time one of these Natalie Bollinger sleuth group things pop up, I get another influx of people threatening and harassing me on YouTube and Facebook. And it's easy to block them. That is easy to do. It's not so easy when you can't run away and Robert Warnick is coming out into the street and getting in your face because you happened to walk by somewhere that he was and he was offended by it. What that's showing is that he is delusional and paranoid over something that I don't have a history of doing. And meanwhile, all of this, I'm prevented from showing evidence in court by them pretending that I'm schizophrenic, by loosely associating the term mentally ill. It's the same issue that we have with black people being targeted. How do we enforce it? If there is no civilian oversight, these officers get away with looking away from the crimes committed. If a black man is beaten up by two white guys and the police don't want to investigate it, who's going to make them? It's still a hate crime, is it not? Now, if somebody rapes a little boy instead of a little girl, it's still illegal. But the little boy is less likely to speak up, especially the older that he gets. The older that he gets, a man is treated like, well, you know, if that ever happened to you, you can never truly be a man. And then your excuses why they deserve it is because of a trauma response. That's not okay. It's not okay for somebody to have a trauma response to being abused. No, when you're backed into a corner, it doesn't matter if you are a rabbit or a rat or a garter snake or a rattlesnake. You're backed into a corner. You are going to defend yourself. That is fight or flight.